Look, I do just want to acknowledge Don and Graham and Samantha. As Samantha said, I finish at Feds officially tomorrow, actually, and that's 6 years to the day that I started. And I deliberately resigned on that day because the day after tomorrow I turn 50. So having spent almost 4 years of my 20s at Feds and 6 of my 40s at Feds, I didn't want to spend one day of my 50s at Feds. So that's nothing against Feds, it's just because I've been to far too many funerals and I don't want to spend my life wondering whether I could have done something else. So I'm getting into a bunch of stuff that I really want to do. Look, today I just want to do a couple of things. As Samantha said, I might just talk a wee bit about Feds and a wee bit about the political sort of situation, and then I want to talk about, this is your 100 years, and I want to talk a wee bit about some of the issues I think we need to be thinking about at a very high level, whoever the government is and whatever our industry is, and just throw a few thoughts out there. Look, I put up this photo here just simply because I can. In my 50 years on the planet, that's the first time I've been able to hold the Ranfurly Shield as a very proud Southlander. So in all my presentations, I just put that photo up, and we can move on from that now. Look, the future is about the indefinite period after the present. And we can spend our lives, and I think sometimes as trade associations, and I use that term respectfully, we can sometimes live a wee bit in the past and think about the past a bit too much. And I think what politicians like Dr. Smith want to hear is about where you want to be, about where you want to go, and what are the things that they can do to help you get there. You've got to get them to agree that where you want to go is where they would like you to see yourselves go. Otherwise, you might get the old two-finger salute, as my 4-year-old daughter was giving to me there one day. The question I actually asked her was, how many pieces of toast? Look, one of the things that can happen in agriculture, and rural people are absolutely fantastic people. If I had to be stuck on a desert island with a group of people, I would absolutely pick people from the agriculture sector, as well as people from the modelling fraternity as well. But you can get a bit cross-eyed or not quite sure where you're going, and I like this quote, if you're not, you've got to be very careful if you don't know where you're going, because you might not get there. And sometimes we see in any sector, we see people who are looking both ways. We don't know which way they're going. So one of the things that trade associations need to do, and your organisation needs to do, is to get a focus. And I'm not saying you don't have it, I'm just saying that as an organisation, Federated Farmers had to get very focused on what it was that it actually wanted to achieve. Because otherwise you can look a bit silly like this guy here. Look, just a wee bit about my background, the 10-second version. That's me literally singing for my supper. I'm the youngest of 12 kids. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. So from when I was a very early age, I'm mothering up a ewe there. That's my kids. And it's a bit of a different world that they live in now. They wouldn't know one end of a sheep from another. And that's one of the challenges for agriculture, and it perhaps is a challenge for your sector, is that the people that you're dealing with in decision-making roles do not understand the practicalities often. Because like my kids, if they grow up to be in decision-making roles that are around regulation, around rule-making, they don't know what happens on a farm. So we have to help inform them. So a big part of what a trade association does is actually inform people about practical stuff. The Feds model is about having paid professional people. We've got 65 staff spread around the country, and then we've got elected representatives who are hands-on farmers. And there's nothing more powerful for politicians like Nick Smith and right across the political spectrum if they can hear from the horse's mouth why whatever the idea is that the politicians are talking about won't work or will work. So having that practical knowledge is really, really important, and I think that education aspect is an important aspect for organisations like this. Look, I'm not going to talk about that too much, but New Zealand is big. I think as New Zealanders we think we're too small. We're actually, we've got a longer coastline than mainland China and mainland USA. We've got the 4th biggest economic zone in terms of our water bodies. We are bigger than the United Kingdom. We are 78% the size of Japan, which is the 2nd biggest economy in the world. We are 68% the size of Germany in terms of our landmass. We are a big country, not a small country. And so I think a lot of what we need, how we need to think, is a wee bit bigger than often we do. And people talked a wee bit about the green groups, who I've had a lot to do with, and I think are important in a democracy to have a range of views. But I think sometimes we do have to lift ourselves up a bit and think a wee bit bigger than what we sometimes do. Now look, in terms of the political side of things, we've got an election on the 20th of September, and I thought I'd just throw some numbers up here about what happened at the last election and the election before. And I know that in the media there's been this, the polls are high and people are saying the National guys are going to romp in. Well, they're not, because MMP elections are very tight. What could happen, though, is that Labor's vote could absolutely collapse, just like Nationals did when they were led by a very capable leader back in 2002. But the thing that people don't realise, in the last election, there was 1 million people voted for National, about 600,000 for Labor, about 250,000 for the Greens, 147 for New Zealand First, 31 for the Maoris, 23 for the X, 24 for Mana, 13,000 for United Future. Conservatives got 59,000. That's why you're seeing a bit of stuff about, what's going to happen with the Conservatives. Is some deal going to be done somewhere? Because they're wasted votes. We had 26 new MPs, and of the it's just a bit over 3 million voters. It'll be higher now. Only 2.2 million voted. It was the lowest turnout since 1887. So what that translates, those numbers translate into, that's 59 seats. Previously it was 58. That's the number of seats here from the previous election. But the point I want to make is that 5,000 people will determine who's going to be the government in this next election. It's not going to be 150,000, it's going to be 5. So every vote matters. And so the Mana Party and Kim.com could very well change the outcome of the election, very easily. It's probably likely that they'll get 2 or 3 seats. Well, that matters enormously when you only have a majority of 1. So, little things make a big difference. And if we get, there's 1 million people, there's as many people sat on the couch as voted for National. If 10,000 of them get off the couch, and maybe they will, that could have an impact on the outcome of the election. So I'm really pleased we live in a democracy, but what really annoys me is when people criticise the system but they don't vote. So I don't care what your views are, but for goodness sake, get out there and vote. As an organisation, as Federated Farmers, and I'm not the boss there now, I physically left Wednesday before last, but we're apolitical. We actually say we don't care who's in government so long as they agree with us. That's the number 1 rule. Look, in terms of regional planning, and one of the things that impacts on agriculture and impacts on you guys, and particularly the 1080 debate, is what happens at regional government. So here's some of the RMA planning framework. Here's the plan development process. Here's where decisions are made within a council, and here's where you put it all together. So with all due respect to previous governments and ministers of the environment, it's reasonably sort of complicated. So part of what Federated Farmers does is we navigate through that web, really, and it's fraught, but you have to have some system, and no system's perfect, and you have to participate in it. And again, don't complain if you're not participating. So for Feds, over a 100-day period last year, we did 100 submissions in 100 days. We submitted on about 92%, I think it was, over 90% of the district and regional plans across the country. Why? Because it matters. And if you don't have a go and you don't participate, don't complain about the outcome. So you need your organisation that Samantha runs to be participating in things. Don't sit there and say, oh, this is no good and that's no good and why isn't the government doing this or doing that? Well, if you're not participating and engaging, don't complain. So we do, and that's why we've got 65 staff and 30,000 members. Look, just in terms of the overall picture that we're sort of engaging in. So what's the playing field? When you're out here on the field, you know that there's 15 rugby players or however many soccer players. Here at Feds, we're at, we operate at international, national, regional and local level, and also in the sectors, which is sheep and beef, dairy, grains are the main ones. And who are we engaging with? We've got 54,000 people in central and local government administration. That's the army of people. We've got the number of cabinet ministers, MPs, government departments, cabinet committees, select committees. There's 212 central government entities, might actually be a bit more now. There's 78 TLAs. So there's a lot of 54 district and 6 unitary. There's a lot of people to engage with, and that takes a lot of resource. So whatever you're paying your trade association, it'll be too little. And if you want to make a difference, pay more. Because the more resource you have, the more things you can do. Because that's the army that you're fighting against or you're working with. Collaborating with, I think, is the terminology these days. We are Feds, and I say we, because I do finish tomorrow, so I can say we for another day. We are the biggest policy and advocacy shop outside of a government department in New Zealand. As I say, there's 4.5 million people, there's 3 million voters, there's about 30,000 business, and we are a bit of a pimple on an elephant's bum when it comes to the voting public. As I say, we're just another minority group, about the same size as the gay community in New Zealand. So you've got to punch above your weight, as they do. So what do we get focused on? And that's one of the things is, it's an elephant. It's a big elephant. How do you eat this elephant of all these issues that affect things? And I was saying to Samantha early on, sometimes you just got to get a bit of a strategic focus on what you're going to focus on and what you're not going to focus on. That's just as important in any organisation as what you are going to focus on. But look, what we get involved in are two things really. One is our whole reason for being is about profitable and sustainable farming. So that's what it all comes down to. Anything that impacts on the profitability, anything that impacts on the sustainability of it. And when you look at the sort of profitability or viability, we've got a bunch of issues there around input costs and anything that impacts on incomes, and that includes things like monetary and fiscal policy, because that matters. That matters a lot because it affects the exchange rate, and the exchange rate affects the incomes, and it also affects. We've got $53 billion of debt in agriculture, so every 1% extra in interest cost is $500 million cash out of farmers' pockets. So we need governments to run tight fiscal situations, because if they run loose ones, interest rates are higher than they otherwise would be. So if they were 2% higher than they otherwise would be, that's $1 billion cash out of the farmers and rural communities' pockets. And then there's a whole bunch of things here, whether you're profitable or not, you need to actually get right. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff around that whole environmental sustainability, infrastructure, getting stuff on and off farms, but increasingly data on and off farms. Water is the number one issue at the moment. Everything around water, its ownership, its allocation, its management, its storage, and its quality is up for grabs at the moment. Don't let anyone ever tell you that this government is not a reformist government. It's a massive, the change that is bringing in is the biggest change in 100 years, and it's going to impact on the next 100 years. And they're doing it in about 3 years. They're doing it too quick. If I've got a criticism of them, they are far too green. They're going far too fast, and they're being far too hard on the agriculture and farming community. The changes they've implemented are very, very substantial and are going to have a dramatic impact on our rural communities. So anyone from the Green movement who says these guys in the current government don't care about the environment are totally wrong. They have been incredibly brutal with rural New Zealand. And the implications of that are only going to start coming through soon. So we'll see that over the next couple of years. Succession really matters, and that's an issue for you guys. I know you need a few more pilots coming through. That's where we work to get things like gift duty and stamp duty off, and death duties, the three. We want farms. If you want the family farms to continue, you've got to have the next generation coming through, and you can't have it that you have to sell the farm in order to pay your duties. And that's what's going to happen. That's one of the concerns we have around capital gains tax, is that you will see the next generation leave because they'll have to sell to a foreigner in order to have 15% of the value of that farm to pay the government. So we've been trying to get the Labor Party to exempt the family farm from their version of capital gains tax if they're in a position to implement that. The family home's exempt, but the family farm isn't. So if you're going to be anti-family farming like that, why don't you just stand up and say that? Say we're anti the family farm because we're going to make sure that you have to sell the farm in order to pay taxes to the government. And to me, that's wrong. Skills, people matters a lot. A whole bunch of stuff there, research, animal welfare, biosecurity, safe food, and we've seen a bit of stuff in the media over the last couple of years about that. Energy is really important. This urban-rural understanding really matters. Capital, obviously, and the other thing that impacts on us, and I think impacts on you guys, is adverse events. You know, floods, droughts, you name it. Farmers operate in a biological system, and so you need to have a bit of resilience there and a bit of support from time to time. Look, one of the things that I tried to change at Feds when I came in was this whole focus. I used to work in a minister's office for about 3 or 4 years, and I sat there and there'd be some guys or girls come in, thump the table, we got a problem with this, we got a problem with that, we got a problem with the next thing, and they'd get really wound up. And then they'd walk out and you'd sit there and you go, well, what the hell do they want? And so it's really important to understand what the problem is, but it's more important to try and have a solution. Politicians like solutions. They like practical solutions and they like political solutions. And so a lot of what we do is about trying to think through what those solutions are. And you have to have both aspects of it, both the practical stuff and the political stuff. Because if you've got a solution that becomes a political problem for them, that's not going to be implemented by them. So, and if you have just focused on the problem, I've never yet met anyone who can implement a problem. This guy here knows he's got a problem. The more he thinks about his problem, the worse it gets. He's got to start thinking about solutions because he's going to fall off. So that would be my plea to you, is to absolutely understand the problems, but also think about what the solutions are. One of the other things I think that we have a wee bit of trouble with is sometimes people jumping to solutions. So I think sometimes that happens with those in the green side of things. They've jumped to the solution that, if you can kill a cow, you're going to save a river. What they haven't actually done is analysed the problem. So you can have it, if you don't analyse the problem and you jump to a solution, you can solve the wrong problem. And I think that's one of the things we're at risk at doing sometimes in New Zealand on some issues. Look, in terms of dealing with politicians, it's all about them. Politicians are like kids. They like the attention, and there's this fantastic program called Wife Swap. I don't know if you've seen it. It's not an R18 one. It's an above-the-board one. But what it does is it puts people who have a different view of the world together for a week, and they each have to live by the other person's rules. And Nick was talking about, getting some of the green people on to understand the practicalities of the fishermen, and the fishermen to understand the concerns of the environmentalists. That's what this here is about. And without exception, they always learn something from the other person. So if you're trying to get other people to agree with you on something, you need to get in their shoes and see it from their perspective. So sometimes in the agriculture sector, farmers can look at the world from their perspective and they just don't quite have the skill to look at it from the other person's perspective. Until you do, it's going to be hard for you to make progress. So I'd encourage you to do that. You've got to see how the other people see it. The number one asset that I have in my role, and Samantha in her role, is trust. If you don't have trusted relationships, you cannot achieve anything. And in this town, and it's a very small town here in Wellington, if you go and do something if you go and betray someone's trust somewhere, you are not going to make progress. And I think when it comes to an election campaign, often that's what people are sort of assessing is, can I trust this politician or not? I have a wee test with people when I meet people, I have something to do with them. I just ask myself, would I leave my kids with this person for the day? And if I spend a nanosecond questioning that, I never have anything to do with them. So you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be that person that someone else makes that assessment of you. You don't want to be that organisation. So I'm a Sergeant Schultz. I see nothing, I hear nothing, I know nothing. And I talk to all the politicians right across the spectrum. That's the other thing is that you need to do, is that you have to inform all the politicians, work with them all. Sometimes farmers go, do you actually talk to those guys from the Green Party? I say, talk to them, drink a shitload of Chardonnay with them. Because if you don't engage with people and develop trust, you can't get things to happen. So treasure trust, it matters a lot. Look, I'm not going to focus on this stuff too much. The ETS, we do know there's a problem because fashion tells us that there is a problem. But I guess part of, we've convinced this current government that they need to sort of calm down a bit on the ETS stuff. And part of it was about, this notion that farmers pay someone some money and then we get the weather we want. We're really into it. We'll give you the money and you give us the weather. That's a great thing to do. So we're really keen on that. And of course, they know that that's not going to quite happen that way. So let's get real about it. And as Nick used the word practical a number of times, it's actually getting practical about it. Let's be honest. We could kill all the animals in New Zealand, plant the whole place in trees, kill all the people. We're not going to change the world's climate. But we absolutely have to take our responsibility and play our part towards that issue of climate change. And so what does that mean? Well, it means practical things to us. It means putting more research into productivity. So now every unit of output takes less units of input, and that's why New Zealand farmers are amongst the most efficient on the world. So you need more food produced here, not less, if you are concerned about the global climate. So penalising and taxing farmers into loss situations isn't going to improve the global climate. You need a bit of collaboration globally. So there's this partnership, there's 35 different countries looking for the silver bullet, and you need things like water storage. If you think it's going to get hotter, it's not a bad idea to store some water. That's what the Romans figured out and the Egyptians figured out a couple of thousand years ago. I don't understand why we haven't sort of figured that out. We waste an enormous amount of water. 96% of our water goes out to sea. It's a disgrace. We should have dams all the way up our eastern seaboard. There's a couple of billion people turning up, and we're letting all this water go out to sea. Who the hell do we think we are? We're wasting water like that. It's just ridiculous. We have got a change in dairy numbers, gone up 80%. Beef numbers about the same, and sheep numbers have gone down 45%. That's actually become a political issue. And that's a structural change in farming and land use. And there'll be things in your industry that'll shift around like that. There's a whole bunch of things that we've achieved there. I won't spend too much time on that, but it adds up to quite a lot. I do want to just make a comment on a few things I think we just need to think about it at a high level. And that is just exactly this. The future happens quicker. That's a family photo. But everything does happen a hell of a lot quicker. So you've got to really keep up with change and really keep up with the pace of change. And sometimes organisations can't be nimble enough to make decisions as fast as you need to make them. So you need to be able to be, sort of guerrilla warfare, if you like. Demographics. Look, there's a whole lot about demographics. To me, 80% of everything that happens is about demographics. And the short version of the demographic thing is that on the demand side, for New Zealand, the demographic story is incredibly positive. That is, we've got a couple of billion people turning up, a couple of billion extra people turning up. Everyone's living a bit longer. They're all a bit richer. They're shifting from starch to protein diets. And successive governments, both national and Labour governments, have positioned New Zealand extremely well through the successful negotiation of trade agreements with the rising economies, if you like, of the East. So we've had this big shift from west to east. My kids are in that photo. Their whole geopolitical conversation that they're going to be having over the next 50 years is going to be dramatically different than the one that I've had over the last 50 years. We're seeing, in my view, we're seeing what's happening now to America is what happened to Britain about 100 years ago. You're seeing the decline of an empire and the rise of another empire. And that's the Asian aspect. Look, there's a bit of stuff here on just the structure of demographics. A lot of what we've got, I'll just flick through this. This is the age profile. India is growing like it's going out of fashion. Japan is in big trouble. They're going to lose 30 million people in the next 20 years. They've got some big challenges, as has Europe. The forecast for the population of Germany in the next 20 years, I think, is another million people. So there'll be about 81 million people. I think Thailand has currently got about 80 million people. They're forecasting to be about 160 million people. So where the growth is shifting dramatically. And so our trade patterns need to shift. And our tourism patterns will be shifting. But what's not shifting is what we're teaching our kids in the school. What's not shifting is our understanding of the cultures of these new economies that we are now trading with. China's our number one trading partner. How much Chinese is taught in our schools? How much history of China is taught in our schools? None, or very close to none. So it's ridiculous. So our whole schooling system has got to change. We are an Asian country. We're also a Western country, and we're very fortunate to have a foot in both camps. New Zealand population is ageing. Farmers' population is ageing. There's a few profiles here, which I won't dwell on too much, but I suspect that in your sector you'll have a similar demographic, because everywhere in New Zealand, pretty much the population is sort of stagnant. This is a massive generalisation. It's growing in Auckland, but everywhere else it's sort of stagnant to falling, and that's where places like Hawke's Bay, with that dam, it's about the only hope they've got. I was quoted recently saying that they're going to head towards third world status. Well, it's true. If they don't build that dam, there's actually not a hell of a lot going for a fantastic place like Hawke's Bay. We've got regional New Zealand under a bit of pressure there. Look, broadband, I'll touch on this very quickly, there's 5 key words that every politician needs to understand. Rural people are people too. Imagine that. Imagine if rural people were people too. So all the stuff you think is going to be really good about broadband in the cities, imagine if that applied in the country. So we managed to get the government to put in another $300 million into that, just on the basis of that argument. If you want to double exports, exports are grown in the countryside, and that's where the broadband is the least effective. That's a really critical part of the infrastructure. Look, I'll just show you this one here. This is what I was sort of talking about. When you look back over the last couple of thousand years, all that happened back here in the 1800s was that the Asian economies decided not to participate in the Industrial Revolution. And now they have. And so you're seeing the GDPs grow here, and they're going to get back in the next 20 years to where they were historically. So that massive, massive shift is a massive, massive opportunity. And so what you're seeing happening in China is what happened in the United Kingdom 100 years ago. The difference, though, is at the height of the Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom, they had about 20 million people. They were growing at about 2% a year. China, the height of their industrialisation, growing at 20% a year with 1.2 billion people. So they are like a nuclear bomb on the global space. That's why they've gone from number 10 to number 1 in about 3 years as a trading partner for New Zealand. So we've got to get our heads around that. Which is why issues like foreign ownership, this guy here is so angry about it he made a sign, and that takes a lot of anger. How many of you here have made a sign? Not many of you, so you just aren't angry enough about anything. But foreign ownership actually is a political issue, but it actually matters because we've got to get the balance right. The whole of New Zealand is built on foreigners. We've all come from somewhere else, and so has the money. So we've just got to think that whole issue through pretty carefully. The supply side of things is pretty challenging because we just haven't got enough people in New Zealand to run and own and operate our farms. We've got a lot of immigrants coming in to milk cows and to work on farms. The families are getting smaller and the farms are getting bigger. As I say, I'm one of 12. I've only got 6 kids. I'm a half-assed bastard. But down every road, there's just a lot less domestically produced people. So we're going to have to look at that whole issue. Look, innovation, I'm not going to go through all that, but if you don't innovate, you're dead. And it's good, it's interesting to see the bloody helicopter thing down the corner. That's going to revolutionise not only your industry, but it's going to revolutionise agriculture, just that wee thing sitting on the table down there. Look, one of the things I'll tell the story here. This here is a photo of a phone box. And I was in the Kuru Lounge in Sydney one time, and I was going to the loo, and I walked past this bloody phone box, and then I took out my phone over there, and I took a photo of it and emailed it to myself. And what really struck me about that phone box, the people who built that phone box, they thought they're the best in the world. And they probably are. Where, should I say? It probably cost about 50 grand, and, it was pretty cool. Then I looked at the target market and the population who use phones. Everyone was sitting with their cell phones, sitting there. And people were just looking at that phone box saying, what the hell are Air New Zealand doing with a phone box and this thing, Why do I want to be stuck to the wall? Why do I have to put some coins in the damn thing? You know, it's a stupid tool. It doesn't even take photos, for God's sake. You know? So when my father was born, which was in about 1912, you know, they'd hardly invented the phone. The whole idea that I could take a photo with a phone and email it to myself is just amazing. So that revolution has been incredible. But what these guys didn't do, they'll go broke. If you go to the Koori Lounge now, there's no phone boxes because they're redundant. And that's the challenge for New Zealand and New Zealand agriculture. We think we're really good. We think we're the best in the world. But there's always other people out there thinking as well. There's always other people out there trying to do better and trying to do better than us. If you sit there and think you're so bloody cool and you don't do anything, you end up like the phone box. You end up redundant. And that's what happened to Kodak. They didn't understand that you need to be able to talk into a camera. They thought a camera was about taking photos. They didn't realise it was about talking to people. They didn't get it. So they failed to innovate. Speed we've sort of talked about. I love this photo. I don't know who this guy is, but he's obviously not too interested. This whole thing about innovation, one of the most profound changes I think we've had in the last 2,000 or 3,000 years is this ability, I say, you know, for people to turn from readers to writers. When I go and stay in a hotel, I don't listen to what the hotel tells me. I don't read what they say. I actually what other people say about it. And so we've had this big flip around. We've had a democratisation, actually. You see what's happening in Ukraine now? Because of technology and the internet and mobile phones and bloody cameras, you've got stuff that we all know about that 30 years ago we would never have known about. We wouldn't have known that bloody plane would have crashed at all. So you've actually got a democratisation of a lot of these other countries, but we've also got the power of the consumer has increased dramatically, because if you do something that's a bit dodgy, they can just take a video, upload it, and it goes global in a matter of minutes. So we've actually really got to take account of that. Everything you do is visible. You're on a stage now. But I'll finish with one point. The biggest thing that's going to influence the future is the unpredicted. And if you look at everything that's happened over the last 2, 3, 4 decades, the biggest things that have happened have obviously been the things that no one has thought about. So what is it that's happening in your sector that you're not thinking about that could come and slam dunk you? You know, this situation in Ukraine, that could be a pivotal change in the aviation industry. I don't know. But always think about the unexpected. Anyway, that's it from me because I think I've run out of time. Cheers.